back. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.
Yes, talking money on this episode of Boomer Life here on CIL 650 with our friends from Abakhan and Associates, including the boss, George Abakhan, is with us, and also Nicole Clark, who is a bankruptcy and insolvency counselor at Abakhan and Associates. Nicole, let's start with you this time around. One of the horrors of being seriously in debt is the sideshow that comes with it. I mean, it's a kind of a self-inflicted situation, to be sure. You talk to people who come to the office at the end of their tether, but they also have evidence to prove, usually in the form of large numbers of unopened bank statements and credit card statements, that they've been dealing with this, however poorly, for quite some time. By the time they get to your office, they've been receiving nasty notes. I assume they opened one or two of those, and telephone calls probably on a daily basis. When a person decides, okay, enough already, I've got to end this, this somehow has to stop, the only person that can stop it is that individual by coming to see you, right?
Yeah, so what happens with filing a debt settlement proposal or bankruptcy is that there's a line in the sand that gets drawn. And from that point on, there's a stay of proceedings in place from creditors contacting collection agents, anybody like that. A lot of times what people share with us is that they aren't even answering their phones, or
Right.
they've changed numbers so many times to get away from these collection agents. And the things people have reported as to what they say, they really find out a person's weakness or where they are in life, and they play on that, and they say nasty things, and they make people cry, and they get the number based on you filling out an application. You know, you've applied for credit, you've probably somewhere put your cell phone number or emergency contact number or your work, and these collection agents, they will not stop at just a phone call to you, especially if you're not answering, is they will contact your work and they will say personal things, you know, to employers.
Is that legal even?
I don't know, George, I don't know if you know, but I don't think they're really governed as far as I can see.
It seems awfully gray area on a good day, George.
The Better Business Bureau, I guess you could make complaints to.
Yeah, you can make complaints to them. I'm not sure they would do anything. But one thing I find is that what I tell them when the person comes to me and they're being totally harassed, and there's two situations here we should probably get into a little bit. One is that I tell them, look, tell them that Abakhan and Associates is dealing with it. They're going to get some paperwork, and they tell me, the people I've talked to tell me that their attitude changes almost automatically, because they know that if the debtor is approaching us, that they're either going to get a debt settlement or a bankruptcy of some sort. Generally a debt settlement offer,
right.
And there's no sense in harassing them anymore. And then you have the garnishee situation where the debtor comes to us and they're frantic because they're going to lose the payroll on the following Friday.
Right.
Well, there we have to work a little quicker, a little harder to expedite the process, and we will to do that in order to help that person, and also stop the garnishee so that they can at least get enough money for the weekend, for whatever.
Well, you know, Nicole, you were talking about sort of shady behavior by some of these collection agents and individual sort of lone wolves who really, they work on commission, don't they? They only get paid if they get whatever money they're chasing you for. They'll get a slice of that if they recover it. Otherwise, they're talking into the wind, aren't they?
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Okay, so is it legal for a collection agent to call up an indebted person and say, unless you pony up the dough, I'm calling your boss, and I'm going to make sure that they know what a slacker you are, or fill in the blank? Is that legal even?
I would suggest that that's not legal. I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
But I would think that the collection agent is overstepping the mark,
right,
to say the least.
But they do. And so, Nicole, all you need to do to just end that chaos in your life, because it's really quite ugly. There's no other word for it. And if you want to just put a stop to all of that, you have to go see a professional. There's no other way that's going to happen, right?
Correct. Yeah, and definitely, you know, if you are having collection agents and it's for a significant debt and you do have income to be able to support some payment back, they'll know that. And basically the next step from there is usually, like George said, is garnishee. And
right.
These creditors usually garnishee at the 30% mark. So that money is not available for your future needs.
They'll take 30% of your wages.
Okay.
Right from the employer.
Right from the employer. But as I say, I reiterate that if they tell them that they're working with Abakhan Associates to do a proposal, the collection agent generally backs off. Very rarely do we have it. In fact, once we filed, of course, they have protection.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, if they're still harassing them, then we get the phone numbers of the collection agents and we'll contact them.
Right, okay. Back off, basically,
Yeah.
right. George, along with the process of the voting and the business of the intimidation by collection agencies, there are a lot of facts surrounding debt problems that people either ignore or just don't know. And part of that is brought on by the stress of being in debt in the first place. Add in some nasty phone calls and some intimidating letters, and pretty soon it just feels like the whole world is against you. So when people finally come down for that initial free consultation and sit down in your office, I'm sure a lot of them are, as I've mentioned before, are quite convinced that the only option they have in life is to sit down with a trustee because I got to go bankrupt and I guess I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose my car, I'm out, I'm hooped, I'm done, right? People come to you and they say that, don't they?
That's right. And what I tell them is that if you want to keep the house, pay the mortgage. If you want to keep the car, pay the lease payment. If I look at it and I see there's a big F350 to go and do your grocery shopping, then I suggest that they go and get a smart car.
Right. Or a used car.
At a tenth of the price.
Exactly.
Because you all have these seize or sue provisions in the province where if you seize the car, if the lender seizes the car, then they can't sue you. And I keep telling them, I say, okay, now you have this window. If you want to get rid of the car and you can afford to, from the payments that you're going to save, get a second-hand car.
Sure.
Or a much smaller car that'll save you all the gas and insurance, etc., then now is the time to do it. But, you know, they have to be willing to do that. Many people do that. On the other hand, there are some people that like their F350.
Oh, yes, indeed there are. Nicole, what happens, and I'm kind of stretching here, but this would not be the first time this would have crossed your desk. What happens when someone calls up clearly in distress? And so you provide them with some good advice, and you listen to their story, and you arrange an appointment and so on. And they come down, and they've got one of these, assets. Here are my assets, and here are my liabilities, and here you go. And they give you the paperwork, and darn if they haven't fudged on a few things, if they haven't, declared all of their assets. They've got a couple of little sweet things they just really don't want to let go of because, it's that sweet. Is that a crime? And what happens when it's discovered that some assets have not been declared?
Well, it really depends on whether they filed a bankruptcy or proposal, but when you come in and you actually sign the documents, you're signing with a commissioner of taking affidavits and oaths.
Okay.
So you're swearing and you're signing under oath. So sometimes there are things not on the application and they realize, okay, now I'm under oath, and these things, I would say, come through, and people feel the guilt and the shame, and they come clean. However, there are some situations where you don't find out until after, and sometimes it's straight from the banks. People have said that they've had assets on their applications to the banks, or to ex-wives or whoever else. And we get those calls and we do find out. So it's best just to have full disclosure and say what it is. Because if you don't report those things, it could really affect the whole process for you.
Right. And one other negative question before we take the break here, George, and that's after you've gone to all the trouble of organizing the voting process, you've discussed a repayment plan, the debt solution that works for the client. The creditors vote in favor. They accept it. And then somewhere down the road, after all the wheels start moving, the client drops the ball and doesn't make payments. What happens then?
Oh, well, in the case where they don't make the payments, we have to assess the situation. Is it a permanent change? Is it a temporary change? And maybe we have to file an amended proposal.
Okay.
But it's an assessment situation. It's not inevitably just bankruptcy. We work with the individual and figure out a way of getting them back, either the same proposal, making payments to catch up, or maybe filing an amended proposal with a reduced amount and explaining it to the creditors.
The problem solvers with a lot of solutions to debt problems. Abakhan and Associates, George Abakhan and Nicole Clark in studio with us. It's Boomer Life on CIL 650. We've got some more for you here. Just stick around. We'll be right back.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.